Look, I need to be completely honest with you right from the start. My name is Quintara, and I am what you might call, well, let us just say I am not exactly the bravest Zeltherian in the galaxy. In fact, when it comes to courage, I rank somewhere between a frightened moss spore and a particularly anxious space slug. So naturally, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor, I found myself enrolled in the most terrifying course offered at Galactic University, Predatory Species Analysis. Why did I take this class? Simple. I needed the credits, and every other course was full. The academic advisor, a smug tentaclan with too many eyes and not enough sympathy, assured me it would be educational. Education, sure. If your idea of education involves learning exactly how many different ways you can be eaten by things that should not exist. Professor Moran stood at the front of our lecture hall, his forearms gesticulating wildly as he addressed our class of 23 increasingly nervous students. Moran was a Corthic, which meant he looked like someone had crossbred a praying mantis with a philosophy professor and then given the result a PhD in making everyone uncomfortable. Students, he announced, his voice carrying that particular tone that professors use when they are about to ruin your day. Today marks a very special occasion in our semester. We have been studying theoretical predatory behaviors for weeks now, analyzing hunting patterns, kill ratios and territorial instincts through holovids and data files. But today we observe a live specimen. The collective gasp from my classmates could have powered a small starship. Morting, a blob-like gelatonian sitting 3 seats to my left, actually deflated with terror. The crystalloid twins in the back row began that high-pitched harmonic whining they do when stressed. Even Brandon Torres, the toughest student in our class and built like a walking tank, went pale green around his gill slits. Now, Professor Moran continued, clearly enjoying our obvious distress. I know what you are all thinking, but rest assured, we have taken every possible precaution. The specimen is contained within our most advanced containment unit, designed specifically for Class 7 predators. Class 7? My hearts, all 3 of them, began beating so fast I was worried they might achieve orbital velocity. For those unfamiliar with the Galactic Threat Classification System, Class 7 represents species so dangerous that most civilized worlds require a military escort just to transport their remains. The specimen, Professor Moran announced with theatrical flair, hails from the infamous death world known as Earth. Half the class immediately began hyperventilating. 2 students fainted outright. I personally experienced what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience, except my spirit was trying to flee to another galaxy entirely. Earth, the legendary nightmare planet where everything, and I mean everything, evolved specifically to murder everything else. The world so terrifying that Galactic Command had classified it as a do not approach under any circumstances zone until recently. The planet that spawned the humans, those bipedal nightmares that somehow survived by befriending their predators. Behold, Professor Moran declared, pressing a button on his remote, one of Earth's most efficient killing machines. A creature so perfectly adapted for hunting that it has remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings, I present to you, Whiskers. The front panel of the containment unit became transparent, and we all leaned forward despite our terror, expecting to see some horrible amalgamation of claws, fangs, and murderous intent. What we saw instead was, well, it was small, covered in orange and white fur. It had 4 legs, a tail, pointed ears, and was currently engaged in what appeared to be licking its own paw. By the 7 moons of Zelth, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own panic. It is grooming itself before it feeds. The creature, this Whiskers, looked up at us with large round eyes that seemed to glow with an inner fire. Then, and I swear this is true, it opened its mouth and made the most bone-chilling sound I had ever heard. Meow. Mortin actually liquefied from fear right there in his seat. Just when I thought this day could not possibly get any worse. And believe me, when you are staring at a contained Earth predator that sounds like a malfunctioning air recycler, you think you have hit rock bottom. The classroom door slid open with a soft hiss. Sorry I'm late, Professor Moran, called a cheerful voice that made every single one of my scales stand on end. I got lost trying to find the xenobiology wing. This place is huge. Amy Kowalski walked into our classroom like she owned the place, which given her species' reputation for planetary conquest she probably did. She was the exchange student we had all heard whispered rumors about, the first human ever admitted to Galactic University under the new Cultural Integration Initiative. Most of us had never seen a human in person before, and honestly, I had been perfectly fine with that arrangement. She looked surprisingly normal. 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal locomotion, no visible weapons or armor plating. But that was exactly what made humans so terrifying, was it not? They looked harmless right up until they started domesticating your planet's apex predators and teaching them to fetch newspapers. The reaction in our classroom was immediate and catastrophic. The crystalloid twins actually shattered from shock. Not metaphorically, literally shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces that would take maintenance hours to sweep up. Morton, who had just managed to re-solidify after the cat incident, immediately turned liquid again and began flowing toward the emergency exits. 3 other students activated their personal emergency beacons, filling the air with urgent beeping sounds. "Oh, wonderful," I muttered under my breath. "Now we have both the predator and its trainer in the same room. What is next? Are they going to bring in the entire Earth military?" Professor Moran, however, looked absolutely delighted. His compound eyes gleamed with the kind of satisfaction that professors get when they realize they are about to traumatize an entire semester's worth of students in one spectacular lesson. Class, he called out, trying to restore some semblance of order, while stepping carefully around the liquefied Morton. "Please welcome our exchange student, Amy Kowalski, from the Sol system. Amy, you are just in time to observe our live specimen demonstration." Amy looked around the classroom, taking in the obvious panic, the shattered crystalloid remains, and the general atmosphere of impending doom. Then her gaze fell on the containment unit, and her expression shifted from confusion to was that amusement. "Is that?" She squinted at the viewing port, moving closer to get a better look. Every step she took toward the container caused a fresh wave of panic among my classmates. "Is that a cat?" "Indeed," Professor Moran beamed, clearly thinking he had hit the pedagogue jackpot. "One of Earth's most efficient predators. I understand your species has developed some sort of symbiotic relationship with these creatures." Amy stared at him for a long moment, and I swear I could see her processing this information. Then she started laughing. Not the maniacal laughter of a predator about to feed, but genuine, confused laughter that somehow made the situation even more terrifying. "You guys put a house cat in a Class 7 containment unit?" she asked, wiping tears from her eyes. "Oh my God, that's the funniest thing I've seen all week. Poor little guy must be scared out of his mind." Scared? The predator was scared? This was clearly some sort of human psychological warfare technique. Lull us into a false sense of security by pretending their living weapons had emotions. "Amy," Professor Moran said slowly, "perhaps you could share with the class how your species managed to tame these killers." But Amy was not paying attention anymore. She had walked right up to the containment unit, walked right up to it and was making soft cooing sounds at the creature inside. The predator, Whiskers, immediately responded by pressing itself against the transparent barrier and producing that bone-chilling meow sound repeatedly. "They're communicating," someone screamed from the back of the class. "She's activating it," shrieked another student. "It recognizes her as its alpha," Morton gurgled from his puddle on the floor. Amy turned back to us with a frown. "Guys, he's just saying hello. Look, he's purring because he's happy to see a familiar species." The sound that emerged from the containment unit next was unlike anything in our xenobiology textbooks. A low, rumbling vibration that seemed to resonate through the floor, through our desks, through our very bones. It was the sound a fusion reactor makes right before it explodes, the sound of tectonic plates shifting, the sound of impending doom. "That is its hunting purr," I gasped, my voice reaching pitches I did not know I was capable of. "It is preparing to feed." Professor Moran, looking slightly less confident now, pressed his emergency communicator. "Security to classroom Sigma 7. We need assistance with our demonstration." "What kind of assistance?" came the crackling reply. Send Brandon Torres, Moran said, his voice tight, and tell him to bring the heavy equipment. Amy meanwhile had somehow gotten even closer to the containment unit and was now speaking directly to the predator in what could only be described as combat coordination. "Who's a good boy?" she was saying. "Are you stuck in there? Do you want out?" The creature responded with an even louder purr and began what appeared to be an escape assessment, walking around the perimeter of its prison while maintaining eye contact with its human handler. I made a mental note to update my will. The situation rapidly deteriorated from terrifying academic demonstration to impending galactic crisis in the span of approximately 30 seconds. And yes, I timed it, because when you think you are about to become prey, time tends to move very slowly and very precisely. Whiskers, and I use that deceptively innocent name with the same tone one might use for planetary annihilator, was becoming increasingly agitated inside his containment unit. The combination of alien fear pheromones flooding the classroom and the electronic containment field's constant humming was clearly affecting the creature's predatory instincts. The purring stopped. That bone-rattling, reactor-like sound just stopped, which, according to everything I knew about predator behavior, meant it was shifting from content to hunting mode. What came next was infinitely worse. Maro, Maro, Maro. The sounds were different now, sharper, more urgent, more desperate. If I did not know better, I would have said the creature sounded distressed. But that was impossible. Earth predators do not experience distress. They experience hunger, territory disputes, and the joy of successful kills. That was it. "Those are its hunting calls," whispered Zephyr, a Valekian student whose species had particularly sensitive hearing. "It is summoning the pack." Amy spun around to face us, her expression a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. "Pack? What pack? Guys, he's not hunting. He's scared. Look at him. He's in a metal box with weird lights and electronic noises, surrounded by creatures he's never seen before. Of course he's upset." Scared? A Class 7 predator? This was clearly advanced human psychological manipulation. Make us believe their weapons have emotions, lower our guard, then, wham, coordinated pack assault. Professor Moran said carefully, "Perhaps you could explain to the class how your species manages to coexist with these creatures." "Oh, that's easy," Amy said brightly, completely oblivious to the fact that she was about to confirm our worst nightmares. "We give them hunting toys to play with, let them practice their stalking behaviors on laser pointers, and they bring us dead things as gifts to show affection." The silence that followed could have been measured in geological ages. "They practice hunting?" someone whispered. "With laser weapons?" gasped another. "They bring you corpses as tribute," I squeaked, my voice climbing to frequencies that probably registered on deep space communication arrays. Amy nodded enthusiastically. "Oh yeah, mice, birds, sometimes lizards. My cat back home once brought me half a squirrel. It was gross, but you have to appreciate the thought, you know." "Half a squirrel," she said, it like it was a birthday present. Before anyone could process this revelation fully, the classroom door burst open with such force that it nearly came off its hinges. Commander Tom Marley strode in, followed by a full hazmat team in environmental suits that looked like they could survive direct exposure to a black hole. Commander Marley was a thoraxian, built like a walking fortress, with mandibles that could crack steel and enough military decorations to fund a small moon. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had personally witnessed the heat death of several solar systems. "Professor Moran," he barked, "we have reports of an unauthorized Class 7 containment breach in progress. All students are to evacuate immediately while we—" His words were cut off by a sound that will haunt my dreams until the day my scales finally molt for the last time. A soft, innocent click that somehow managed to carry more menace than a fleet of dreadnoughts charging their weapons. The containment unit's primary latch had failed. The front panel slid open with a gentle hiss. Whiskers stepped out. The evacuation alert that immediately echoed through the campus was loud enough to shatter windows on 3 different levels. Emergency lights bathed everything in apocalyptic red. Automated voices began announcing code Omega, Apex Predator Breach. All personnel to evacuation stations. This is not a drill. But here is the thing that still makes my circulatory system seize up when I think about it. The creature did not attack. It did not leap onto the nearest student and begin the feeding frenzy we all expected. Instead, it did something far more terrifying. The speed was inhuman. One moment Whiskers was standing by the containment unit. The next he was weaving between desks with fluid grace that defied physics. Students dove for cover, screaming. Morton had given up on maintaining solid form entirely, and was now just a panicked puddle spreading across multiple floor tiles. "It is going for the Alpha," Commander Marley shouted, raising what looked like a military-grade plasma rifle. "The human has activated its pact loyalty protocols, but then something happened that broke every single theory we had about human-predator combat partnerships. Instead of joining Amy in some coordinated attack on the rest of us, Whiskers did something that redefined the word unexpected. He jumped into her arms. Amy caught him like this was the most natural thing in the galaxy, and the predator immediately began producing that rumbling purr again, but louder now, more intense. It was pressing its head against her chin and, "By the Seven Suns," I breathed, "it is scent marking her. She really is the Alpha." "No, no, no," Amy protested, apparently realizing how this looked to the rest of us. "He's not scent marking, he's just happy to see a familiar face. Cats do this thing called head bonking when the—" "Head bonking?" Commander Malley interrupted, his weapon still trained on the pair. "You mean combat initiation?" "What? No, it means he likes me." "The predator has developed emotional attachment to its handler," whispered one of the hazmat team members into his communicator. "Repeat, emotional attachment confirmed. Request immediate psychological warfare specialists." Amy was now holding a purring Earth predator against her chest like it was some sort of pet, which, according to human propaganda, was exactly what they claimed these creatures were. The audacity was staggering. "Look," Amy said, apparently deciding to try a different approach. "I know this looks weird from your perspective, but cats are really just—" Whiskers chose that moment to extend his claws, actual retractable blades built into his paws, and began what could only be described as a kneading motion against Amy's shirt. "Preparing the meat for consumption," added another voice. "The predator-handler symbiosis includes pre-feeding rituals," Commander Marley shouted into his communicator. "Request immediate orbital support." Amy looked down at the purring creature in her arms, then back at us, and I swear I could see the exact moment when she realized that absolutely nothing she said was going to make this situation better. What happened next can only be described as the most spectacular overreaction in the recorded history of galactic education. Within minutes of Whiskers' escape, every security protocol known to civilized spacefaring species had been activated simultaneously. The campus lockdown sirens wailed like banshees with particularly bad cases of indigestion. Blast doors slammed shut throughout the university complex. Emergency force fields flickered to life across corridors, trapping confused students in classrooms, while automated defense turrets emerged from hidden panels in the walls. "Attention all personnel," boomed the campus-wide announcement system. "We have a confirmed Class 7 Predator breach in progress. Lockdown protocols are now active. Do not approach the creature. Do not make eye contact. Do not attempt to reason with it. Remain calm and await further instructions." Meanwhile, Amy Kowalski was casually strolling around our classroom with Whiskers perched on her shoulders like some sort of furry, purring hat of doom. The predator had apparently decided that this elevated position provided optimal tactical advantage for surveying his new territory. "See," Amy said cheerfully, completely oblivious to the fact that orbital defense platforms were probably already targeting our coordinates. "He's just a big softy. Watch this. He loves getting his chin scratched." She reached up and began rubbing under Whiskers' chin with her fingers. The creature's response was immediate and terrifying. His eyes closed to narrow slits, his head tilted back in obvious ecstasy, and that bone-deep purring intensified until it was vibrating through the floor plates. "By the void," Commander Marley whispered into his communicator, "the human is stimulating its pleasure centers. The creature is experiencing post-hunt satisfaction." "Repeat, We may be witnessing feeding aftermath behaviors. Admiral, Squawk warbled. Ground control reports the predator has bonded with the human female. They are requesting permission to glass the entire campus from orbit. Hold that thought, Admiral Vashi reportedly replied, his 3 eyes fixed on the tactical display showing our university. Let me see if General Kraftnog can handle this with conventional forces first. I would prefer not to explain to the Galactic Council why we had to sterilize an entire educational facility. Back in our classroom, Amy had apparently decided that the best way to calm everyone down was to demonstrate more of Whiskers' harmless behaviors. This decision would later be studied in military academies as a textbook example of how good intentions can lead to tactical disasters of unprecedented scale. Look, he's making biscuits, Amy announced as Whiskers began that rhythmic pressing motion with his paws against her shoulder. Biscuits? Professor Moran asked weakly. You know, kneading. Like when they knead dough but with their claws, it means he's happy. The hazmat team took several steps backward. One of them was frantically taking notes on a blast-resistant tablet. The creature is tenderizing the human for optimal consumption, the note-taker reported. Predator appears to have extensive food preparation protocols. That is not. Oh, come on, Amy protested. Then Whiskers did something that made the situation exponentially worse. He began head-bonking her cheek with obvious affection. Territorial marking, screamed someone from the back of the classroom. It is claiming the human as pack property. No, it is just. The human now belongs to the Predator Collective, Commander Marley announced grimly into his communicator. We may need to consider her a lost cause. At that exact moment, the classroom's emergency communicator crackled to life with a new voice, rough, authoritative and carrying the weight of someone who had personally conquered 17 star systems before breakfast. This is General Kraftnog of the Galactic Defense Force. I am mobilizing 3 full battle groups to contain this situation. Commander Marley, what is your assessment of the threat level? Commander Marley looked at Amy, who was now playing with Whiskers' paws while the creature purred loud enough to register on seismic equipment. Sir, the Predator has established dominance over the human operative. They appear to be coordinating some form of bonding ritual. Bonding ritual? The General's voice took on a tone that suggested he was already planning funeral arrangements for all of us. Are we looking at a potential breeding scenario? What? Amy shrieked, her voice reaching octaves that probably violated several noise ordinances. We are not. He is a cat. I am a human. That is not how biology works. But her protests were drowned out by another voice crackling over the emergency channel, this one belonging to Quartermaster A, whose species name was unpronounceable and who handled military supply requisitions for the entire sector. General Kraftnog, sir, came the tinny voice, regarding your request for anti-predator weaponry, effective against Earth creatures. I regret to inform you that regulations prohibit the distribution of such equipment. What regulations? The General barked. Subsection 847C of the Galactic Warfare Convention, sir, quote, no military force shall knowingly engage Earthborn creatures in direct combat due to the high probability of said creatures being protected by human battle bond protocols, end quote. The paperwork alone would take 3 standard years to process, sir. There was a long pause during which I could practically hear General Kraftnog's career aspirations deflating. Are you telling me, the General said slowly, that we cannot officially acknowledge that we are fighting Earth demons because of bureaucratic red tape? That is correct, sir. However, I can offer you some strongly worded diplomatic protests and a complimentary stress relief hologram. Amy, meanwhile, had apparently given up on trying to explain anything to anyone. She was now sitting cross-legged on the floor with Whiskers in her lap, both of them looking remarkably calm, considering that half the galaxy was currently mobilizing to either capture or obliterate them. You know what, she said to no one in particular, I am just going to sit here and wait for this to blow over. Anyone want to pet the nice kitty? The collective no that erupted from everyone present was loud enough to trigger 3 more evacuation alerts. It was my own terror-induced questioning that finally broke through Amy's confusion and made her realize just how catastrophically we had all misunderstood the situation. Please, I squeaked from behind an overturned desk, my voice cracking with panic. Just tell us what it wants. Does it need tribute, charity, a sacrifice? What can we offer the creature to spare our lives? Amy stared at me for a long moment, Whiskers still purring contentedly in her lap. Then something clicked behind her eyes, that moment of dawning comprehension, when the universe suddenly makes sense in the worst possible way. Oh God, she said slowly. You think he's dangerous? You actually think cats are weapons, are they not? Commander Mali asked cautiously, his weapon still raised but wavering slightly. No, they are pets, companions. We keep them in our homes for fun. Amy exclaimed, then immediately winced as she realized how that sounded to a room full of terrified aliens. I mean, they live with us voluntarily. They choose to stay because we feed them and give them warm places to sleep, and they... Amy paused, clearly trying to think of how to explain this without making it sound more sinister. They purr and keep us company, and sometimes they catch mice that get into the house. The silence that followed was broken only by Whiskers deciding this was the perfect moment to demonstrate Amy's point by yawning widely, displaying an impressive array of sharp teeth, then immediately curling up in her lap for a nap. It is sleeping? I asked, my voice barely audible. Yeah, cats sleep like 16 hours a day. They are basically professional nappers who occasionally interrupt their sleep schedule to eat or play. Amy reached into her bag and pulled out what appeared to be a small cloth object. Here, watch this. She tossed it gently toward Whiskers, who immediately perked up and began batting at it with his paws. By the 7 moons, breathed Zephyr, it is playing? It's a toy mouse, Amy explained. Fake, he likes to pretend to hunt it, but look, no actual hunting, just batting things around for entertainment. Whiskers had indeed caught the toy mouse, and was now carrying it around in his mouth, making muffled purring sounds. He brought you the kill, Commander Mali observed suspiciously. He brought me a toy, Amy corrected. Here, Whiskers, drop it. The cat immediately released the toy mouse, and looked up at her expectantly. Amy produced a small container from her bag. Snack time? What came next shattered every preconception we had about Earth predators. Amy poured some small brown pellets into her palm, and Whiskers began eating them one by one, crunching contentedly. Those are processed nutrients, Professor Moran asked weakly. Cat kibble, chicken-flavored. He also likes the salmon kind, but this was all I had in my bag. Mortin, who had finally managed to maintain solid form for more than 5 minutes, was the first to voice what we were all thinking. So you are telling us, he said slowly, that your species has taken one of your planet's predators, convinced it to live in your homes, and turned it into a recreational companion? Pretty much, yeah. And it does not try to eat you? Well, sometimes he nibbles my fingers when he wants attention, but that barely counts. The communication channel crackled to life again, but this time it was a different voice, Admiral Drahorn from the Second Fleet. Ground Control, this is Admiral Drahorn. We have been monitoring your video feeds from orbit, and I have some questions about this Class 7 Predator. Are you certain of your classification? Because from up here, it looks like it is napping. Professor Moran's compound eyes slowly focused on Whiskers, who had indeed fallen asleep in Amy's lap, occasionally twitching his paws as he dreamed whatever dreams Earth predators dream. Admiral, Professor Moran said, his voice barely above a whisper. I think we may have made a slight miscalculation. The sound of an entire fleet standing down could be heard echoing through the emergency channels, followed by what might have been the most expensive facepalm in galactic military history. Once the various military forces had finished standing down, a process that took approximately 3 hours and involved more paperwork than the average planetary annexation, our predatory species analysis class resumed with what could generously be called a revised curriculum. Professor Moran, his academic dignity somewhere between severely wounded and completely obliterated, had reluctantly agreed to let Amy serve as a guest lecturer on the topic of Earth fauna separating fact from galactic fiction. Whiskers, meanwhile, had claimed the professor's desk as his personal territory, and was currently demonstrating the fearsome Earth predator behavior known as aggressive napping. So, Amy began, addressing our much smaller class. Several students had apparently decided that even a debunked Earth predator was still too much excitement for one semester. I think the main thing to understand is that not everything from Earth is trying to kill you. In fact, most of Earth's animals are just trying to live their lives, find food and avoid becoming someone else's food. But the documentation clearly states that Earth is a death world, protested Zephyr, though she had moved close enough to actually observe Whiskers without hyperventilating. Well, yeah, Earth can be dangerous, Amy admitted. We have weather that can level cities, natural disasters, and some legitimately scary wildlife. But we also have creatures like Whiskers here, who evolved alongside early humans and figured out that living with us was easier than living in the wild. Morting, who had appointed himself as the class skeptic but was slowly warming to Amy's explanations, raised a gelatinous appendage. So these cats chose to associate with humans. They were not captured and trained? Nope. Thousands of years ago, cats basically domesticated themselves. They moved into human settlements to hunt the rodents that ate our stored grain. We appreciated the pest control. They appreciated the easy food source. Win-win. Professor Moran, watching Whiskers stretch luxuriously before returning to his nap, looked like he was reconsidering every academic decision he had ever made. As the semester progressed, something unprecedented happened. Whiskers became the unofficial mascot of Galactic University. Under heavy supervision, of course, the administration was not taking any chances after what became known as the Great Cat Catastrophe of Semester 7, but students from across the campus would come to observe the Earth creature during designated safe viewing hours. I found myself oddly fascinated by the whole arrangement. Here was this creature that we had all feared, sleeping peacefully in a patch of artificial sunlight, occasionally opening one eye to monitor his domain before returning to his very important napping duties. The incident had ramifications far beyond our classroom. My cousin, Judge Quintara, yes, we have confusing naming conventions in our family, later told me that the case had become required study material in interspecies law courses throughout the galaxy. The legal brief is titled Kowalski vs. Galactic Threat Assessment Protocol, she explained during our monthly family video call. It is being used as a precedent for why cultural context matters in threat assessment. Who would have thought that a sleeping Earth creature would revolutionize military law? Amy, for her part, seemed to find the whole situation hilarious rather than traumatic. She eventually submitted a formal report to Earth's Cultural Exchange Division, which I was privileged to read thanks to my newfound friendship with our resident human. The report, titled Why the Galaxy Thinks Your Cat Could Conquer Planets, a field study in interspecies miscommunication, became required reading for all future human exchange students. My favorite excerpt was her conclusion. In summary, the galactic community has somehow managed to convince itself that Earth's domestic animals are sophisticated bioweapons rather than creatures that have evolved to exploit human emotional responses for food, shelter, and belly rubs. This misunderstanding led to the deployment of 3 battle fleets, 2 orbital bombardment platforms, and approximately 47 different military specialists, all to contain a creature whose primary concerns are nap time scheduling and the optimal warmth distribution of sunny windowsills. As I write this final reflection, Whiskers has been living on campus for 6 months. He has successfully trained the cafeteria staff to provide him with premium fish selections, established territorial control over 3 different sunny spots in the library, and has somehow convinced maintenance to install a small cat door in Professor Moran's office. The most terrifying thing about the whole experience? Amy recently mentioned in passing that her family back on Earth also keeps something called a dog. When pressed for details, she described it as bigger than a cat, more energetic, extremely loyal, and bred for thousands of years to work alongside humans in various capacities including hunting, guarding, and companionship. I have submitted a formal request to the Galactic Threat Assessment Committee to preemptively classify all Earth dogs as Class 12 strategic weapons, just to be safe. After all, we have learned that when it comes to Earth creatures, it is better to overestimate than to be surprised by another harmless pet that can apparently hypnotize entire university administrations into providing premium food service. Some lessons I have discovered are better learned from a safe distance, preferably from orbit.